Good morning. Let's talk about Alexander the Great in the Hellenistic era for our Greece unit. Hopefully, this is a name you've heard about before, something that you're somewhat familiar with, maybe through some Percy Jackson movies or who knows. I don't know at all the things that he is referenced in pop culture, but it is a lot. All right, so the whole reason that we learn about Alexander in the Hellenistic era is what he did to truly spread Greek culture. And that's why we call this the Hellenistic time period or Hellenic time period. This refers to the time that Greek culture spread out in all of the area that you see that is shaded dark orange, which is Alexander the Great's empire. So, most notably, Alexander the Great is known for conquering the Persian Empire and taking and combining the empire started by Alexander's father and combining it with Persia, thus making the largest empire the world had ever seen to this up until this point. The only person who will create a larger empire than him will be Genghis Khan, but that won't happen for six, 700, 800 years later. Trying to do the quick math in my head and it's not working out very well. All right. The line of purple that you see is showing the path that Alexander took to conquer this territory. Modern day, I want to point out where this would be so we have a better understanding. Once again, here's Greece, modern day Greece. The territory today for the Persian Empire would literally cover all of this. If you were in my classroom, I have a giant map on my wall, and I always take my hand and put it on the map. And literally, the size of my hand is the size of the Persian Empire. So that combined with Alexander's Greek Empire makes the largest empire the world had ever seen. So let's talk about Alexander, where he came from, how he started to have control over the area of Greece, and why he decided to move on to Persia in the first place. So, fun fact, Alexander the Great is not Greek. Isn't that funny? He spreads Greek culture. He's most notably known for spreading Greek culture, and he's actually not Greek. He was Macedonian. Macedonia is still a country today, but Macedonia was an area right above Greece. This is a modern day map, so you can have an idea where Macedonia is. But Macedonia was an area right above Greece, the Macedonians. And I told you yesterday, they were viewed as barbarians. They were viewed as unorganized people. They were viewed as just kind of like a ragtag group of animal skin wearing savages to the top of Greece. They were very rural. They were organized into groups, not into city states. And the Greeks just really didn't pay too much attention to them until there was a guy named Philip II. And Philip II admired the Greeks and he copied Greek culture and he wanted to be more like the civilized Greek people. So he builds a powerful army and he turns this rural Macedonia into a chief power. And his goal, his dream, is to unite all of Greece under Macedonia and be one massive fighting force. Athens tries to fight back, but Macedonia wins and takes over all of Greece and unites it all together. Now, remember, the reason he is successful in doing this was because of the Peloponnesian War that ripped apart any chance of Sparta and Athens cooperating with each other to unite against Macedonia. So smart Philip for looking out for that hole to come in and conquer. Philip wanted Greece to help him fight Persia. So his goal was to take his new united Greece and Macedonia and go after the dreaded old enemy of Persia. But he's assassinated before his dream comes true. Sadly, he is killed at his daughter's wedding by an old bodyguard. And his son Alexander is going to take his place and make that dream come true. So Alexander the Great, now here's two things about Alexander that are going to be left up to interpretation. Some history books say he was 20, some say he was 21, some say he was 22. You have to remember that the records of this time period were not insanely accurate. So just know he was in his young 20s when he came to power. He was prepared because his father always took him with him whenever his father went out on a military campaign. So if his father went to war, Alexander was by his side. And so he learned how to command troops. He learned how to fight. And so he becomes a very good strategist. Now, the other amazing, fabulous thing that his father did was he brought Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, to Macedonia to train Alexander when Alexander was a young boy. That's amazing to think that your teacher could be one of the greatest Greek philosophers of all time. But Aristotle taught him to think and reason, and that makes Alexander a fabulous military strategist. So he quickly plans to invade the Persian Empire. All right, so 334 BC, he enters Persian territory right here in what is Asia Minor. He enters right here, and he brings with him 37,000 men and 5,000 cavalry from Greece and Macedonia, from here to Asia Minor. Within the year, he frees all those Ionian city-states that we talked about yesterday, and he defeats the first army of Persia. So within 1 year, he pretty much clears modern-day Turkey from Persian control. After he gets Asia Minor, he heads south to Egypt, and he takes over as Egypt. The Egyptians name him Pharaoh, and he builds the capital city of Alexandria in Egypt, since he now controls that territory. So by this point, he's like kicking out Persia from a huge chunk of their own empire. And he heads to the epic battle near Syria of Gorgamila. That's how you pronounce that. The Battle of Gorgamila is the decisive battle that allowed Alexander to take over the rest of the Persian Empire. And interestingly enough, at this battle, he actually made the Persian king run away in fear, which is why he won this battle. He had 100,000 troops at this battle. The Persians had 300,000 plus. So in all honesty, the Persians should have won. But Alexander took his men and charged directly at the Persian ruler, who was another Darius, not the same one from yesterday, but another Darius. And Darius ran away. And when he ran away and abandoned his Persian troops, they surrendered. So that's how he won the epic battle of Gorgamila. All right, so let's go home. If you can see on this map, here's the Battle of Gorgamila, and then look at that red. This is still where Alexander marched and explored and set up, okay? Over here is India. When the troops of Alexander's reach India, it's monsoon season, which means there's heavy, heavy rains, and the troops just demand to go home. They've been away from home for coming up on a decade. They want to go home. So they start marching home through the southern Iranian deserts. The hysterical thing is that they wanted to leave India because of the monsoon rains, and they're marching across the desert and run out of water. How funny is that? Now, Alexander, the other thing you need to know about him is he fought shoulder to shoulder with his men, and he always felt the pain of war with his men. And as they're going through the desert, they ran out of water. And so one of them finds a canteen and he brings it up to Alexander and says, "Leader, here is our last water. It is for you." He takes the water and he dumps it out onto the sand. And obviously the troops are like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he said, "If you are not drinking, I am not drinking." Which I'd have been like, "Dude, if you didn't want it, just give it back to me and let me drink it." But he truly wanted his men to think that he was one with them. By the time he returns to the city of Babylon, which we talked about with Hammurabi, he was wounded, had a fever, had drank too much alcohol, and he died at 32 before planning more conquest. There are 3 theories to his death. One is the one that I just showed you, that quite frankly, he was dehydrated. He was wounded from literally fighting in every battle. He was not the guy that stood at the back on his horse and watched the battle happening. He fought shoulder to shoulder with his men. So that is one theory. The other theory is that he had malaria. And then most recently, there's a third theory that they believe his generals poisoned him to take over the empire from him. So we'll never know, though. We won't know which one is true. But bottom line, he died. His legacy, his master strategy and tactics. I mean, guys, think about this. This man who only had this tiny little territory to his name defeated the largest and most powerful empire in the world with 50,000 and then 100,000 troops. I mean, this Persian Empire had 300,000 troops to come squash Alexander, and he defeated them. He never lost a battle. He risked his own life in front of his troops. He imitated the Greek hero Achilles, who's the famous Achilles heel. And he slept with the Iliad, which is the story of Achilles, and a dagger underneath his pillow. He never lost a battle. Just keep that in mind. Due to his conquest, he spread Greek language, Greek architecture, Greek literature, and Greek art through Southwest and Central Asia and North Africa, all through the Middle East. And when he died, the empire falls apart. So if you see in this image, there's multiple colors. If Alexander would have been alive, this would have been united into one color because he would have been in charge of it all. But nobody could have kept this empire together other than Alexander the Great, because no one would have been loved by his own men as much as Alexander the Great was. Okay. Just to give you a little art history here, this is the most famous piece of Hellenistic art. This is a picture that I actually took when I got to go to the Louvre, where she is housed. This is Nike, the goddess of victory. Yes, that's why Nike is called Nike. Nike, the brand, is named for the goddess of victory, but Nike was also started by a track coach out of Oregon who made shoes for his runners out of a waffle iron, and he put the famous Nike check on the shoes named after the goddess of victory, which comes from this statue because when she had a head back in the day, the Nike swoosh, the Nike check is her head in this wing. That is where that comes from today. But this is the best example of Hellenistic art, and you can see how fabulous the Greeks were with art, especially statuary, how detailed and wonderful and beautiful this is. All right, so to recap, why, oh, why we learn about Alexander. Why is he so important? Well, step number one, he creates the largest empire the world has ever known. If I could type, that'd be great. Number two, he spread Greek culture. Number three, not type. Number three, he was educated by Aristotle, and thus is the best strategist in history. He never lost a battle. Took over the entire Persian Empire, and he never lost a battle. All right, so that's Alexander the Great. Good job.